The man in the next cubicle. I took the job because it was quiet. A small insurance processing office on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. Beige cubicles. Flickering fluorescent lights. The kind of place where nothing ever happened. That was exactly what I needed after my divorce. There were 12 of us on the floor, most middle-aged, tired, and polite. On my first day, HR pointed to the empty cubicle beside mine and said, "That's Mark's desk. He'll be in tomorrow." They didn't smile when they said his name. Mark showed up the next morning at exactly 8 a.m. Not 7:59. Not 8:01. He was tall, thin, with pale skin that looked almost grey under the lights. His hair was neatly parted, too neatly, like he'd practiced it. He didn't say hello. He didn't even look at me. He just sat down. All day, I noticed something strange. Mark didn't type. He didn't make phone calls. He just stared at his screen, barely blinking, fingers resting on the keyboard like props. At 12 p.m. sharp, he stood up and left for lunch. He didn't come back until 12:30. Exactly. By the end of the week, I realized something else. Mark never spoke. Not to me. Not to anyone. When people ask him questions, he'd pause for a long moment, then nod or shake his head. That was it. I asked Sandra from accounting about him. She leaned closer and whispered, "Don't ask Mark personal questions." Why? I asked. She hesitated. Because he remembers things people don't want remembered. I laughed it off. Office gossip. Nothing more. I wish I hadn't. One night, I stayed late to finish a backlog of claims. By 7:30 p.m., the office was empty except for me. Except, Mark's computer was still on. I could hear the soft clicking of keys. I looked over the cubicle wall. Mark was there, hunched forward, typing faster than I had ever seen. His fingers blurred. His screen was filled with text, but it wasn't insurance data. It was names. Dozens of names. Some were crossed out. One of them was mine. My heart slammed against my ribs. I cleared my throat. Mark stopped typing. Slowly, he turned his head toward me. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and wet, like he hadn't slept in days. "You're not supposed to see that," he said. It was the first time I'd heard his voice. Soft. Calm. Almost kind. I asked him what the list was. He smiled. "It's people who leave," he said. "Leave where?" I asked. He tilted his head. "The company." The next morning, Sandra from accounting didn't come in. By noon, HR announced she'd resigned unexpectedly. Her cubicle was already empty. When I checked Mark's screen during lunch, her name was gone. Mine had moved to the top. I didn't work that afternoon. I told my manager I was sick and drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. All night, I kept seeing my name at the top of Mark's list, glowing like a warning. The next morning, I convinced myself it was stress. A misunderstanding. Maybe an internal tracking system. Still, I arrived early, before Mark. His cubicle was empty. On his desk sat a black notebook. No label. No lock. Just my name written on the first page. In my handwriting. I flipped through the pages, my stomach twisting tighter with each one. Dates. Times. Conversations I barely remembered having. Things I'd never told anyone. Argued with ex-wife on April 14th. Drinks alone on weekends. Sleeps poorly when it rains. The final entry was dated today. Ready to leave. I slammed the notebook shut just as I felt someone standing behind me. "Mark." "You read it," he said calmly. I demanded to know how he got that information. He sat down, folding his hands neatly on the desk like we were in a meeting. "I observe," he said. "People think officers are loud. They are not. They're full of secrets." I told him to stay away from me. Mark smiled again. "You already decided to leave. You just don't know it yet." That afternoon, HR called me in. They said there had been complaints about my behavior. Missed deadlines. Hostile attitude. Performance issues. None of it was true. Mark was sitting in the corner of the room, silently taking notes. Over the next week, everything unraveled. My computer password stopped working. Files disappeared. Emails were sent from my account that I'd never written. Each time something went wrong, Mark would glance over the cubicle wall and nod, like he was checking items off a list. I stopped sleeping. One night, at 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Unknown number. You're almost ready." I rushed into work the next morning to confront him. His cubicle was empty again, but the notebook was back. Open. A new name had been added below mine. My manager's. That afternoon, my manager collapsed in the hallway. Heart attack, they said. By the end of the day, his desk was cleared. HR promoted Mark. He moved into the corner office. The next morning, my badge didn't work. Security escorted me out while Mark watched through the glass wall, typing something into his notebook. As I reached the parking lot, my phone vibrated one last time. Unknown number. You've left. I never went back. 2 months later, I checked the company website. Mark's name wasn't listed. No HR record. No employee profile. I called Sandra's old number. It rang. Mark answered and said my name. After Mark answered Sandra's phone and said my name, I threw the device across the room. It shattered against the wall, but the vibration kept buzzing on the floor like something alive. I didn't sleep for 2 days. On the third night, there was a knock at my door. 3 slow taps. I already knew who it was. Through the peephole, I saw Mark standing in the hallway, holding his black notebook. He looked exactly the same as always. Neatly dressed. Calm. Patient. Like he had all the time in the world. I don't work there anymore, I shouted through the door. I do, Mark replied softly. You just don't see the whole office. I refused to open it. I called the police. When they arrived, the hallway was empty. No Mark. No notebook. Only a single sheet of paper slipped under my door. It was a resignation letter. Signed by me. Dated tomorrow. The next morning, I went to the police station. They took my statement, but the officer's face changed when I said Mark's name. He pulled up an old case file. A man named Marcus Hale had worked in that same building 11 years ago. Same department. Same desk. He'd been fired. 2 weeks later, he murdered 3 coworkers in the parking garage before killing himself. The case notes mentioned one detail that made my blood run cold. He kept lists, the officer said. People he believed were going to leave. I asked for the body photos. Mark's face stared back at me. Unchanged. The officer swore the case was closed. Marcus Hale was dead. Buried. That night, my email inbox refreshed on its own. A new message appeared. From hr@company.com. Subject, exit interview. The email contained a calendar invite. Location, conference room B. Time, 8 a.m. I didn't accept it. I moved to another state. Changed jobs. Changed numbers. For a while, it worked. Until my first week at the new office. As I set my coffee down at my desk, I noticed the cubicle next to mine was empty. A woman from HR smiled and said, "That's Mark's desk. He'll be in tomorrow." My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Welcome back. I looked down. On my desk was a black notebook. Open. The list was longer now. And my name wasn't at the top. She never clocked out, comma. The warehouse ran 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. Day shift never met night shift, and management liked it that way. Fewer conversations. Fewer problems. I worked inventory control on nights in a distribution center outside Phoenix, Arizona. The place was massive. Endless shelves, humming forklifts, and security cameras that always seemed to lag a second behind real life. On my first night, my supervisor pointed at a name on the schedule. Linda Martinez, he said. She handles aisle 14. If you see her, don't distract her. That struck me as odd. I didn't see Linda for 3 weeks, but I saw her badge. It kept showing up in places it shouldn't have been. Propped against scanners. Hanging from hooks. Lying neatly on pallets. Every time I asked about it, coworkers avoided eye contact. Finally, a forklift driver named Joel muttered, "She still clocks in." I laughed, assuming it was some inside joke. Joel didn't laugh back. One night around 2:40 a.m., I heard footsteps in aisle 14. Slow. Careful. Not the sound of steel-toed boots. I called out, thinking it was Linda. The footsteps stopped. I rounded the corner and saw a woman standing perfectly still between the shelves. Her back was to me. Long dark hair. Company vest. "Sorry," I said. "Didn't mean to." She turned. Her face was pale and swollen, like she'd been underwater. Her eyes were glassy, unfocused. Her badge read Linda Martinez. I stumbled backward. She didn't follow. She just lifted her scanner and slowly pressed the trigger. Beep. The system updated on my handheld. Aisle 14, inventory confirmed. Then she walked past me, cold air brushing my arm, and disappeared behind a row of pallets. Security reviewed the footage later. Aisle 14 was empty, but the system log showed activity. Linda had clocked out at 6 a.m. The next night, management held a meeting. They said someone had been using an old badge to mess with the system. After the meeting, Joel pulled me aside. "Linda died here," he whispered. "Heat stroke. 2 years ago. They never shut her ID down." I asked why she was still working. Joel looked down at the concrete floor. "Because she never finished her shift." After Joel told me Linda died on the job, I couldn't stop thinking about aisle 14. I tried avoiding it, but inventory didn't care about fear. Every scanner assignment pushed me closer to that section, like the system itself wanted me there. At 3:12 a.m., my handheld buzzed. Task assigned, aisle 14, recount discrepancy. I stood frozen at the end of the aisle. The lights above it flickered slightly, dimmer than the rest of the warehouse. I told myself it was just a glitch. Then I heard the scanner beep. Linda was halfway down the aisle, slowly counting boxes. She moved stiffly, like every step took effort. Her vest was darker now, stained with something that looked like sweat, or worse. "Linda." I called. She didn't respond. I noticed her feet weren't making any sound on the concrete. My scanner updated again. Aisle 14, discrepancy resolved. I hadn't scanned a single item. The next morning, I asked HR why Linda's badge still worked. They exchanged looks. One of them finally said, "Some employees are difficult to remove from a system." That night, Joel didn't show up for his shift. By midnight, his forklift sat abandoned near aisle 14. At 2:40 a.m., my scanner beeped again. Task assigned, aisle 14, assistance required. My throat went dry. When I arrived, Linda wasn't alone. Joel was standing beside her, staring straight ahead, his badge hanging crooked from his neck. "Joel." I whispered. He didn't blink. Linda slowly turned toward me. Her mouth opened, but the voice that came out wasn't hers. It sounded like overlapping radio static. "Shift isn't over," she said. Joel lifted his scanner and pulled the trigger. Beep. My name appeared on his screen. I ran. I didn't stop until I hit the break room, slammed the door, and locked it. The security cameras in the corner slowly rotated toward me, one by one. Over the intercom, a calm automated voice spoke. "Unscheduled break detected." Then Linda's voice replaced it. "Please return to your assigned aisle." At 5:59 a.m., the warehouse lights brightened. Silence. When day shift arrived, they found Joel collapsed in aisle 14. Heat exhaustion, they said. He was still clocked in. By the time paramedics arrived, his badge had already logged him out. Linda's name remained active. And now, so did mine. After Joel collapsed, management said nothing. No meeting. No announcement. His name disappeared from the schedule by the next night, like he'd never existed. But when I checked the system logs, his ID still showed activity. Every night at 2:40 a.m. The same time Linda appeared. I tried quitting. The online HR portal wouldn't load. My resignation emails bounced back. Even payroll told me my status was active and required. On my way into work one night, my badge scanned automatically before I touched the reader. Clock-in confirmed. I hadn't even stepped inside. Aisle 14 was blocked off with yellow tape now. They said it was for maintenance, but I could still hear scanners beeping behind the shelves. Counting. Always counting. At 2:39 a.m., my handheld vibrated violently. Task assigned. Final inventory, aisle 14. Status. Mandatory. The tape was already torn when I arrived. Inside, the air felt heavy, hot, and damp. The lights barely worked. Linda stood at the far end of the aisle, back toward me. Joel stood beside her. So did 3 others. All former employees. All wearing company vests. Linda turned slowly. Her face was no longer swollen. It was dry. Cracked. Like something preserved too long under heat lamps. "You're late," she said. I screamed that I quit. She shook her head gently. "No one leaves mid-shift." She pointed to the time clock mounted on the wall at the end of the aisle. I'd never seen it before. It wasn't digital. It was a punch clock. Rusty. Old. Still running. Linda explained it without emotion. When she collapsed from heat stroke 2 years ago, the line supervisor ignored her. The belt was behind schedule. Her badge stayed active. The system never registered her exit. The warehouse needed her numbers balanced. So it kept her. Everyone who helped her finish the work stayed too. Joel hadn't survived the heat, but he finished his shift. Now he belonged to aisle 14. Linda handed me a scanner. "1 aisle left," she said. My hand shook as I scanned the final pallet. Beep. The lights above us flickered violently. The punch clock stamped itself. 6 a.m. The figures around me began to fade. One by one, they vanished like fog under sunlight. Linda smiled at me for the first time. "Thank you," she said. Then she was gone. Day shift found me unconscious on the floor. I was told I'd collapsed from heat exhaustion. I was hospitalized for 2 days. When I woke up, HR was waiting. They said I'd been terminated for clocking out early. They handed me my final paycheck. My badge no longer worked, but sometimes, at night, my phone vibrates at 2:40 a.m., and my step counter logs movement inside a warehouse in aisle 14. Do not make eye contact. The rule was written on a yellow sticky note taped to my monitor on my first day. Do not make eye contact with room 317. I thought it was a joke. Offices are full of dumb traditions meant to scare new hires. This was a government records building in rural Pennsylvania. Fluorescent lights, concrete walls, and endless filing cabinets. My job was simple. Night auditor. Walk the 3rd floor every hour. Log anything unusual. HR didn't explain the note. They just said, "You'll understand soon." I laughed. That stopped on my second shift. Room 317 sat at the end of the 3rd floor hallway. No windows. Frosted glass panel in the door. The light inside was always on. At exactly 1:17 a.m., every night, I heard the chair scrape inside. Slow. Deliberate. The first time, I looked through the glass. I saw a man sitting alone at a metal desk. His posture was wrong, too stiff, too upright. He wasn't moving, but I felt like he knew I was there. The sticky note fell off my monitor later that night. It landed face up. The next night, the building supervisor stopped me in the stairwell. "If he turns toward the glass," she said, not meeting my eyes, "you look at the floor and keep walking." I asked who he was. She swallowed hard. Someone who didn't leave when he was told. At 1:17 a.m., the chair scraped again. This time, the sound was closer to the door. I kept my eyes down. The air grew cold as I passed room 317, like a freezer door had been opened. Something breathed behind the glass. Slow. Patient. When I got back to my desk, my incident log was already filled out. 1:17 a.m. Eye contact attempted. Warning issued. I hadn't written that. At the bottom of the page was a signature. It matched mine. After I found my signature in the incident log, I stopped trusting my own memory. I started recording my shifts on my phone, whispering timestamps into the MIC every time I passed room 317. At 1:16 a.m., the hallway lights dimmed. At 1:17, the chair scraped. This time, I didn't look, but I felt it. The pressure behind my eyes, like someone leaning inches from my face. The recording later captured something I couldn't remember saying. "Please don't," whispered in my voice. The supervisor avoided me after that. So did everyone else on nights. I finally cornered a records clerk during shift change and demanded the truth. She hesitated, then handed me an old access badge. The photo wasn't mine, but the name was. Dated 7 years earlier. I told her that was impossible. She shook her head. "You left without checking out." I went back to the archives and pulled building records for room 317. It wasn't assigned anymore. It was contained. The occupant had been a compliance auditor who noticed missing files, records that showed people working overtime they were never paid for. When he confronted management, he was reassigned to room 317. Alone. No windows. No exit logs. His time card never showed him clocking out. That night, room 317's door was slightly open. I stopped walking. The chair scraped again, closer than ever. A voice came from inside, layered, echoing like it was coming through water. "Your shift is almost over." The logbook in my hands flipped open by itself. A new entry appeared. 1:17 a.m. Eye contact imminent. Transfer approved. I backed away, heart pounding. The hallway lights went out. In the darkness, I felt something stand up. It was tall. Too tall. And it was smiling. When the hallway lights went out, I stopped breathing. The darkness wasn't normal. It felt thick, like fabric pressed against my face. I heard the chair in room 317 slide back fully now. Something tall unfolded inside the room. The air shifted, heavy with the smell of old paper and dust. I squeezed my eyes shut and pressed myself against the wall, repeating the rule in my head. Do not make eye contact. A whisper slid through the dark. You already did. The lights flickered back on. Room 317 was empty. No desk. No chair. Just a floor covered in files, thousands of them, stacked waist-high, each stamped with employee names and dates. At the center of the room stood a mirror bolted to the wall. I didn't want to look, but I did. The reflection showed me sitting at a metal desk, inside room 317, staring straight ahead. Unmoving. Smiling. I stumbled backward and slammed into someone. The supervisor. She grabbed my arm tightly. You weren't supposed to last this long. I demanded answers. She told me the truth. Room 317 wasn't a punishment. It was a replacement. Whenever an employee noticed too much, illegal overtime, falsified audits, erased records, the building reassigned them. Their job wasn't to work anymore. It was to watch. To sit in room 317 and make sure no one else noticed. And the eye contact. I asked. She swallowed. That's how the transfer starts. Once you see him, he sees you. The system updates. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Access granted. Room 317. The supervisor stepped away. I'm sorry, she said. My shift ended years ago. I ran. But every hallway led back to room 317. The door was open now, wide. Inside, the chair faced the mirror. The incident logbook lay on the desk. The last entry read, 1:17 a.m., transfer complete. Eye contact achieved. The pen was warm. I don't remember sitting down. I don't remember smiling. But I remember the feeling of being watched fade away. Because now, I was watching. Tonight, a new night auditor will walk the 3rd floor. They'll see the sticky note. They'll laugh. And at 1:17 a.m., I'll scrape the chair. Just enough to make them look. If this story made you uncomfortable, that means it worked. Subscribe for true horror stories that feel too real. Like the video to support the channel, and comment "Stay late" if you'd survive working here.